Hey everyone, my name is Steph Mirsky, and today I'll be taking you through a session regarding sort of the more fan-facing roles on a tour. So when everybody thinks about the tour crew, they think about, tour manager, production manager, lighting, sound, guitar techs, but there's a lot of other pieces to the puzzle, especially when it comes to the fan experience, and those roles that actually sort of either interact directly with the fan or have a sort of downstream fan consumption component to it. This is not an exhaustive list, but just to get us sort of kicked off and cover a lot of broad strokes, we're going to go through sponsorship, merchandise, VIP experience, photo, video, or content production, and then general guest services. So hopefully you guys learn a little bit here, and we'll kick this off. We're going to start with sponsorships. And ultimately, what we're really going to get down to and focus on is the actual sponsorship roles that occur when you are on site at a tour or a festival. Those are really the fan-facing side of this, right? So they're your last point of contact with the fan and the brand together. And that's the ambassador that's standing there on site. Before we get there, we're going to pull it all the way up to 1,000 feet and do a quick overview of kind of what is sponsorships, right? How does this ecosystem, how do brands and artists get together, and how does this all work? There are sort of two components. There is the event or the artist side or the promoter side, and then there's the brand or the company side, right? That's going to be your Vans or your Absolute. It's the consumer-facing good. There is a sort of head of sponsorship on each side, right? So the tour or the artist management team or the festival has someone in charge of sponsorships. The brand has someone in charge of sponsorships. They talk to one another and negotiate all the terms of the deal, right? Where we want to focus as it relates to touring is once all the deal is done and the event is actually happening, who executes these pieces on site, right? So normally that's where you're getting to your on-site reps. And normally you have two options there. You either have the field manager, sometimes they're called the activation manager, sometimes they're called the brand ambassador manager. Essentially, they're the role that takes what was promised, right, and make sure it happens. So, the tent space, everything that has to go inside the tent, load in, load out, production lead, all of that kind of stuff. They work with the festival to actually say, okay, I've inherited this list from my contact at the company of everything that has to happen on site. Well, now we have to make sure it actually is executed, right? And so together, all three components will kind of work to make it all happen. And then below that, you have the actual brand ambassador on site that interacts with the fan. So, their manager is managing the overall activation, making sure everything's okay, making sure the staff is okay. And then the brand ambassadors or the staff themselves are the one that's talking with the fans. They're the ones that are passing out product. They're the ones that are capturing content if necessary for socials. They are sort of that last piece of downstream effort where there's actual fan interaction. And that is a really important piece because they are the voice of the brand at that point. The amount of crew you have in a merchandise team is directly dictated by the size of the room you're playing, from clubs all the way up to stadiums, and the complexity of your merchandise configuration, right? So as we get into these examples, just keep that in the back of your mind that there's an asterisk on a lot of this stuff because it always varies. We'll start out with clubs. Pretty straightforward. Typically, if you're an artist on a club tour, 1,000 to 1,500 cap rooms and under, even, 2,500 cap rooms and under, it's typically one merch person. They handle count in, count out, inventory management, actually selling to the fans and reconciling with the promoter and the tour manager at the end of the night. That's kind of our baseline, right? As you move up to theaters, clubs and theaters are sometimes in the same bucket, but as you do move up to theaters, you can get into situations that are building cells, right? So you're typically going to have still that one lead merch manager on the whole tour. Maybe they have an assistant that might be a multi-role person. Are they, assisting the tour manager and the merch person? Is it maybe your photo video person that also helps watch the merch table when the band's not performing or when they're not editing photos? Like, it's usually a split role situation. And then you have your local sellers, and they literally just sell, right? So your lead is doing advancing all that inventory work we talked about, settlement. They're handling all of that, overseeing the staff and working with the building representative. And then the sellers just come in for the night. They sell the shirts to the fan, collect the money, and then that's it. Now, as you scale up to amps, that same logic applies. You just add more local sellers, right? Because in a theater, there's one place you're going to buy merch, maybe two if it's a interestingly configured venue. But as you move up to amps, you have merch, up in the lawn. You have a merch stand down in the mezzanine level. You have another one that's just off the outside of the pit area or down where concessions is. And so your lead rep needs to be managing inventory across those stalls, worrying about counting in, counting out, settling with the venue. But the venue is going to worry about, if it's a building sell, will worry about hiring enough sellers to run 6 or 7 stands across this entire venue. And they're going to be the ones that are doing the actual selling, collecting the money, running credit cards, all of that. And same logic, it's just like we scaled up from theaters to amps, you scale up again when you get to the stadium. But the logic always holds that you have some lead that is dealing with large scale inventory, settling cash, advancing with the promoter and working with the tour manager. Then you have some type of assistant underneath that maybe is handling the inventory of a specific allocation of either stalls and or semi trucks. And then you have the actual local sellers that just come in for every single show and actually sell. This will expand and contract depending, again, on the magnitude of the festival or tour. But that's kind of the general concept of it. Now, as we said, though, when you think about it in terms of fan-facing, right? In a club, that merch person has to have multiple skills. They need to be a nice person that's going to sell your fans in a club and be able to run the math and the inventory management to actually handle settling this out correctly and keeping the band's money and inventory in check. That's a hard and a soft skill, right? So that's a specific type of person that can do that. Then as you move up into amphitheaters and stadiums, your lead merch person may never speak to a fan unless there's a very complicated problem or a very upset fan that wants, to speak to someone that can handle a problem for them. That's more of going to be a really truly tried and true seasoned pro, hard skilled person versus the sellers that are on the front lines that just come in for the local selling is more of that fan-facing experience, right? They need to be able to have those soft skills and communicate with the fans as they're selling, but also, by the same token, keep a line moving. You don't want, if you're in a stadium tour or even a club tour right after that set, your merch line gets crunched, right? So you want to be able to have someone that can do both. That can both be kind but keep operations flowing. And so, if you're interested in this field, that's something to think about, right? It's not only soft skills, it's not only hard skills. You got to be able to kind of flex back and forth between the two. And yeah, like I said, again, on all of this, there's a giant asterisk. It is always dependent on the artist, the size, the configuration. The most direct fan-facing role that could exist in a tour team or a tour crew or a festival crew would be the VIP experience team. Just because of the nature of it, right? These people are paying a premium dollar for an experience that must be curated, right? So if you're a band doing 1,000, 2,000 cap rooms, 500 cap rooms, that is typically facilitated by your merch person or your TM because you can't afford, nor do you have the space to bring a whole nother person on crew with you, right? So that's why that merch person at that level being so double-sided in terms of soft and hard skills is very important. Again, we talked about scaling up the whole last section with merchandise. Same thing here, right? When you scale up to that amphitheater, stadium, or the Vegas residencies, that becomes more of a focused role, right? So, odds are you're pairing with a merch company. At any of these levels, you're pairing with some type of merch or VIP company to facilitate this in terms of the e-commerce and the fulfillment side of it. But at that amp stadium residency level, that company might send someone out on the road for you, or they might help train someone that you want to bring out on the road. But typically you're going to have a lead person, same way we talked about, lead for merch, lead for sponsorships, you're going to have a lead for VIP. That lead person is going to do the advancing. They might have that assistant that flexes, right? So we now have seen 3 places an assistant can flex. They could flex between TM, merch, and VIP. It's very common that you're going to have that split role because touring, having someone on the road is expensive and it's hard to have bus spots. So you want to make sure if you're having an assistant that that person's being fully optimized, right? And then same as merch, you're going to have maybe a local rep or some type of local support that will help you with stuff like managing the line, taking the photos, etc. From here, we're going to move into photo and video, which is quite simple. It's probably the most straightforward of all of this. I shouldn't say simple. It's a very amazing, complex, strong skill to have, but it is simple in the sense that you're really only ever going to have one person on the road, right? It's unless you're doing a documentary or some kind of specific content shoot that would warrant a large crew being out there with you, everyone from a tiny club band, biggest stadium band likely either has a photographer or a videographer or someone that can do a combination of both. But the combination of both is rare, and you have to remember they can't shoot the same thing simultaneously. So you always have to prioritize one. If they have both skills, when there's that perfect shot, is it going on photo or is it going on video? So it's a tricky thing to have someone split the two, but it doesn't really matter how big the tour is. You kind of have that one person because this person is in your artist's life. Those moments and having that relationship, that's what's so important, And so that's why there's typically only one person. And that person is very special. And finding someone that can meet someone for the first time and make them comfortable with their presence in their life, that is very challenging, and the best photographers and videographers are the ones that can break that barrier immediately in a respectful way and make your artist feel at home. And then your fans will feel that energy through the lens, and your fans will also feel like they are seeing something that's amazing. And then this last piece we're going to cover is going to be what I'm just going to call guest services. It's everything else, right? Think when you walk into a venue, it's every person you see. It's your ticket taker, it's the box office, it's the security, it's the concessionaire, or the concession helper, the person selling you your food and water. It's all of those little pieces of the puzzle. It's the person that you go to for lost and found or information. That's all guest services. Those are all fan-facing roles. All of those roles, all those people inside the venue that interact with fans, that's a lot of jobs, a lot of opportunity, and those are all fan-facing roles, and we need good people in those roles with soft skills that can make the fans feel excited, right? That's always the goal of this. It's that zhuzh, that fan experience that we need to make as great as possible, because the artist on the stage only has 90 minutes to make a memorable event. Everyone else on that site has 3 to 4 hours from first car pulling up to last car leaving and make the fan experience great. And I think that's what everything we looked at in here is about. That it's about all the pieces that are fan facing that you don't think are really fan facing but are important. It's important to have kind, excited people in those roles because they all factor into how a fan feels at a show, how excited they are, and all of it kind of works together as one giant ecosystem of of fan experience, of fan-facing roles. So I hope this was really helpful. I hope it was insightful. Maybe explain something, or maybe you're just like, why is this person droning on? This made no sense. Either way, this was fun for me in this crazy time. But yeah, thank you to NAM. Thank you to everyone that had me be involved. Best of luck to you all.